Hey everyone, it's Dr. Ramani. A little informal, but it's been a long day and trying to do actually a lot of work. Working with clients who are managing anxieties about coronavirus, trying to create more content just to keep people informed. And to all of you Big Ten fans out there, I apologize, this is not a fandom thing. My brother-in-law went to Ohio State. So all of that said, I hope everyone's doing okay. There are a lot of videos out there, a lot of content, a lot of information about general mental health issues and managing coronavirus. A lot of it has to do with dealing with the stress and isolation of quarantine, with the anxieties and the fears, and making recommendations like meditation and mindfulness. And I think there's a lot of great stuff out there. I want to talk about the one thing, though, that matters most to me, and I think matters to many of you who tune into this YouTube channel, which is really about how do you manage your difficult, toxic, frankly, narcissistic relationships in this absolutely unprecedented time as we manage the stresses around coronavirus. As I do work in this area, I do consultation, I work with clients, I'm answering questions, and I'm reading various reports. I can see that there's several areas that are cropping up. And please, again, if you would in the comments say, are there things here I didn't talk about and tackle that relate to the issue of difficult relationships and coronavirus? Can you please let me know? Because listen, I will keep making these videos. You guys know better than I do because you're living a lot of this. So let's break this down. Number one, what I'm seeing a lot of is gaslighting. People who have been in long-term narcissistic relationships or have family members who are narcissistic or bosses who are narcissistic. So let's break this down. Let's start with sort of the intimate relationship and the gaslighting. Something I'm hearing over and over again, and it's a trend I'm seeing quite a bit, is this idea of people who tend to be more entitled and arrogant and lack empathy, who are really minimizing this, or they're viewing the coronavirus epidemic or pandemic as something personal, like that was designed just to inconvenience them. And so they've gotten to be in very bad moods because, God forbid, they can't have the party they want or the vacation they want or all the things they want, not stopping to think how immeasurably so many people are suffering in the face of this. It's all about them. So they're often minimizing it, accept the impact on them, and then what they're often doing is gaslighting their partners. In more than a few cases I'm hearing about is that there are genuine anxieties about how the virus can get into your home and infect you. And what we do know is people who have been living in long-term narcissistically abusive relationships, anxiety, helplessness, are all part of that clinical picture. Now you got a new set of problems. You're stuck inside with this narcissistic person, and the odds are that they may be gaslighting you. For example, when you say, please wash your hands when you come in the house, and they give their hands maybe a splish splash under the sink if they do that, and then they look and talk to you as though there's something wrong with you when you ask them to give their hands a good 20-second wash, or maybe throw some sanitizer on them. When they're careless about wearing clothes that they've been wearing out and about when they're careless about wearing clothes that they've been wearing out and about in the world, and you ask them to throw in the washer and take a shower, they've pushed back on you there saying, oh my gosh, now, and they accuse you of having, for example, OCD. All of these are examples of gaslighting. And so what they do is often are playing on existing issues that you have in your relationship and minimizing your concerns rather than reassuring you as a healthy partner would do in a very, very difficult time, or distracting you, suggesting you take a walk or spend some time together. For some people, in some households, some people still do have to provide essential services and are still going to work. And in that case, if it's you the one who's having to go to work and not your narcissistic partner, they may be complaining about how you've abandoned them and left them in the house all day alone. Or when you flip it, if your narcissistic partner that's having to go to work and perhaps you've lost your job or your wages have been curtailed or you have to work from home, they may minimize your contribution to the household, either because you're not bringing in as much income or by working at home, they devalue what you're doing. And God forbid if you have kids. The parents of, I would say really kindergarten through middle school ages, particularly those of the little ones through maybe elementary school, are literally my heroes. The idea that you're sitting with amped up little kids who just want to have their either regular routine or their teachers or their friends, and you're trying to keep them on a homeschooling routine is Herculean enough. But to do that when you are being blocked and gaslighted and harassed and aggravated by your narcissistic partner, or who devalues what you're doing by watching these kids during the day and keeping them on track, can also be very destabilizing. Remind yourself, this is just them being them. Unfortunately, now you're in close quarters. Pay attention. When all of this is done, this may fuel some of your decision making in this space. Now, if you have other family members, you may reside with your larger family, you might reside with siblings or parents, and I'm getting a lot of correspondence from people who are saying, my narcissistic parent or parents are already controlling and gaslighting and emotionally abusive enough, and now I'm stuck inside with them. Some of them will say that their parents are going on and on about conspiracy theories, or they have older parents who aren't taking it seriously enough, and that you, as the child, recognizing your parent is entitled and narcissistic, still wants to go to the store, and that you do really worry about what will happen if your older parent gets sick. This is where radical acceptance becomes huge. There's a point at which you can give them the messages, give them the sanitizer, offer to get the groceries, do everything you can. And trust me, if you do go get the groceries, you'll get the wrong groceries, but still you can do it. And if they still keep trying to test the limits and keep putting themselves in harm's way, there's a point at which you need to peacefully say surrender, that you've done everything in your power to stop this from happening, but since you can't legally blockade them, that's the situation you may face. You may be doubly angry because it may very well be you reside with parents and might even have an older person in the house, like a grandparent, and your parents' carelessness or siblings' carelessness may be putting older, more helpless family members at risk. At that point, you may have to take a far more aggressive stance and say, you know what? Taking this fight may be worth it to help that family member. But you will feel frustrated because of the fact that your narcissistic, entitled, and dismissive family members are business as usual. And under this much stress, people with difficult personalities, it really does bring out the worst in them. Because if there's one thing a narcissist can't stand, it's being told what to do. And right now, they're being told what to do in many, many parts of the world by prime ministers, by presidents, by governors, by mayors, by health officials who are not doing this to stick it to the narcissist. They are doing everything we can think of to stave off the proliferation of this pandemic, which has already taken some of our major cities, for example, New York and San Francisco, completely and turned them upside down. So be prepared for this. Realistic expectations, radical acceptance. Something else that's coming back at me, and I'm hearing this on my listservs, from emails and all of that, are toxic and narcissistic bosses who are trying to deem their business as essential. And even when many of the people in the workforce can do their work remotely, are forcing everyone to come in. Remember, by definition, toxic narcissistic bosses are incredibly controlling. They need to have everyone there so they can keep tabs on them and control them all, even knowing there's no need for it. And then what they're doing is not only putting those additional employees that don't need to be there at risk, but then subsequently their families. People are still struggling with this, and there may be issues that at some point when this is all done, labor attorneys are going to have enough work for 100 lifetimes having to pursue this and figure this out. And many people are wondering, what do I do? It's obviously a case-by-case basis, but do know that you're not alone. And then figuring out a way, is there a way to determine, are you an essential service? Can you make a solid argument for why your work may need to be done at home? And this may also be a wake-up call on how toxic this workplace is, that your boss is more than happy to sacrifice your health and your family's health in the name of his or her profits. It's unsettling, but it's often a confirmation of what you already knew to be true. The other thing that's really coming out as I'm watching sort of this sort of trend of difficult relationships and how people are sort of managing, this crisis is coming out in the worst possible way. There were reports coming out every day and some research studies that have already come out of China, as well as some preliminary anecdotal data here out of the United States, that reports of domestic violence are worsening, resources are now less, and many people don't know where to turn, almost feeling that their concerns about being beaten up by a partner will be trivialized in the face of hospitals that are overrun by people who are impacted by the pandemic. The fact is, yeah, at least here in California, emergency rooms are being overrun. But yes, if you've been a victim of violence, you need to go to the emergency room, which carries its own risk now. We do know this, and I've said this over and over again, and I stand by my word on this one, that 100% of domestic violence perpetrators are narcissistic. You understand narcissism, then you understand domestic violence. And here's the problem. Because that's not the frame we view it in, a lot of people say, oh, we can work on anger management and all that. The hell you can. These patterns are entrenched, and we see very, very little change. Under this much stress, this much disappointment, this much confinement, people who are traditionally oppositional, meaning perpetrators of domestic violence, are much more likely to lash out. And throw in there things like the person may have lost their job, there may be financial problems and all of that. And that is a recipe for a pressure cooker at exactly a time when maybe the abused partner often had other outlets like going to work or other places where people would have eyes on him or her. Now that's not an option anymore. And what is happening is that because as people do show up at emergency rooms with wounds of physical violence, many times it's taking the social workers at the hospital that much longer to be able to get them placements in shelters. This is a real issue. And if you believe anyone in your life is at risk, please check in on them and help figure out what kinds of resources are available to them. At the end of this video, we'll make sure also that for the United States at least, we're going to put up the number and the website for the domestic violence hotline. So these are the real kinds of powder keg issues that are coming out of this, that are kind of really going unaddressed because they were not sufficiently addressed before this pandemic, and now they're bringing out the worst of it. And a lot of people, again, are so focused on the anxiety, fear, uncertainty parts of this, that this group of people, all of you, who are struggling in all kinds of difficult relationships in all areas of your life may really, really be struggling with this. The other issue that comes up is how do you manage the boundaries you've already set? I am getting, again, so many messages and calls and contacts about people who say, you know what, I spent months, years setting boundaries, no contact, and all of that with toxic family members. But now those family members are in fact older than me. And although I've been honored by no contact, I'm worried about them. And it's from a place of compassion. The one thing I do have to say about sort of the narcissistic abuse survivorship community, despite all of the abuse, the compassion is so there, and people are survivors, sometimes too much, which is why we often get sucked back into these relationships. But the fact of the matter is that many people are saying, oh, have I failed if I break my no contact? No, you have not. If you do indeed have an older relative that you have gone no contact or tight boundaries with, but you are genuinely concerned about whether they're honoring the social distancing recommendations, the stay-at-home orders, are they getting their medications, and are they getting food? That is called being humane and compassionate. Now, it's quite possible when you pick up the phone or send them a text and say, you doing okay? They might just completely rail into you, and it'll be business as usual. The best you can do then is smile mirthfully and maybe say, to heck with it. I'm just going to drop some groceries on their front step, give them a call, tell them they're there. Trust me, they'll eat the food, but they'll want to give you a tongue lashing. That is what you would expect. And go into that call with realistic expectations. I want you to be prepared for the fact that you may have done the courageous thing of reaching out to a person who's been emotionally abusive to you for years, and yet you may then feel like, oh my gosh, I reached out to you to try to help you, and here we go again. Yeah, that's what's going to happen. That's why you went no contact. But at this absolutely extraordinary time, you want to make decisions that you can live with. And ultimately what we will see, older adults are going to get this, and we're going to lose some of them. If that's something that happens in your family system, please let it be for you that you feel at peace with whatever decision you made. And listen, some people may say, I'm going to honor the no contact. We have plenty of other family members who can step in. Only you know what's right for you. But don't look at breaking your no contact or changing those boundaries around as a fail. You need to do what helps you get through this psychologically intact, but also approach it with radical acceptance and realistic expectations. The other issue that comes up is, how do I get mental health services for all of this stuff around difficult relationships? I mean, that's always tough to find a therapist for that anytime. Those of you who are already in therapy, and if you can afford it, keep going. I know for people who are losing jobs and losing income that is being curtailed. You know what? Call your therapist. See if they'll even do a shorter session for that smaller increment of money. Many of us do. You know what? Sometimes it just takes that 15-minute session to help clients get back online again, so they feel like they can get through another couple of weeks. See if you can find those options. It may be difficult to find a therapist when you can't leave the house, but a lot of us are doing online therapy. In fact, everyone I know has switched over. And so they're just operating their practices out of their homes, honoring the social distancing orders, but are able to see you. So don't think that just because the world has shut down in one way that you can't access those services. They are very much available. And slowly but surely, we're also seeing some reforms that Medicare can actually pay for, things like teletherapy, which traditionally there were limits on. So open yourself up to that, because people do need to talk to people. And earlier I was talking about the issue of domestic violence, and there it would manifest much more as physical violence. But what we do know about difficult relationships is that so much that comes up in that space is psychological abuse. Not just the gaslighting, but the minimizing, the trivializing, the mockery, the lack of help, all of the usual lying. All of it piles up at a time when you feel like you can't escape. You yourself are managing other stressors, such as family, children, your own health, and how to keep a home stocked and going, and concerns about careers and school and all of that. When you take all of that in and you have a partner who's literally almost going out of their way to undermine and sabotage you, that psychological abuse can weigh heavily on you. And that's a time where you may even feel more helpless, when there's such a stranglehold on getting domestic violence assistance at a time when so many people are needing that assistance. You may feel that you don't need it as much. Please, again, don't hesitate. On my website, we have a whole tab that says COVID-19 resources. Please go there. You may very well find something that might link you to something that relates to mental health services in your area, or gives you some guidance on how to find that. Get some of the help you need, because the psychological abuse, to me, is every bit as real as the physical abuse people experience in conditions of domestic violence. And everybody who experiences physical abuse is also experiencing psychological abuse. And we know how often this happens at difficult relationships, especially when you're in this crucible at the time of this pandemic. We are going to come through this, and we are going to come through the other side. Those of you who have read or listened to Don't You Know Who I Am, I had to try to end the book on some kind of a positive note. And as I come to the end of the book, one thing I talk about are, what are the antidotes we have to deal with all this negative energy that come from these narcissistic, difficult relationships in our life. And one very, very important thing to remember is that in some ways, to get good, we can do good. But don't do the good with the narcissist. It ain't going to get you anywhere. You have an elderly neighbor and you can afford it, put some groceries on their front step, or at least check in on them and ask them, is there anything you can get them? They may give you the money to go to the store for them if you're stretched, but then at least you can do that piece of it. Walk around your neighborhood if it's safe to do so, and just pay attention. Say hi to your neighbors. Call PE time with your kids the time you do walk around the neighborhood. If there are virtual ways you can give back to your community, consider that. One of my big stances when it comes to difficult relationships, toxic relationships, is tend your own garden. If we can all follow the recommendations being given in our communities, keep our side of the street clean, and give to those people we know will receive it with open heart and open spirit, that can become a very important antidote to all of what's happening right now in the world. And the final piece, you need support. Anyone going through a difficult or narcissistic relationship, pandemic or no pandemic, needs support. But since so many people are becoming isolated, there's a particular risk for people in toxic relationships. They're often only getting one point of view, which is that of the toxic, difficult person, which is exactly where they wanted you all along. It's really important. I don't care if you have to do it sitting in your closet, sitting on the toilet, going off into the backyard, or sitting in your car. if you can, find moments to FaceTime or Skype or Zoom or call friends, colleagues, anyone you can. If ever there was a call to arms for us to really be putting ourselves out there and reaching out to the people we can support and hoping that the people who can support us can also be there for us. It ain't that you can actually sit down and have a glass of wine with someone who's 3,000 miles away. You both pour one for yourselves and sit there and talk to each other. Believe it or not, I think we are going to kind of get used to talking into screens. Forget about the screens part. You need support if you're in one of these difficult relationships. Like I said, a lot of the mental health guidance out there might feel very useful, but it might feel like it's missing this big piece for you, which is how do I handle the increasing contempt and all the stuff that happens in the close confines of a marriage that's sort of locked down, especially if there's kids running around or other difficult family dynamics operating. There can be a lot of triangulation where family members are turning against each other and creating more chaos, and you didn't share your toilet paper with me, and you didn't bring groceries here, and why did you go to your in-laws first, and on and on and on. These are not easy waters to negotiate. I promise that we're going to keep doing lives so we can keep addressing your questions. If you have ideas for how you want this addressed, drop them down here in the comment section. I really, really do hope that this amazing community of survivors and thrivers are going to be able to push through this. We are going to come through the other side of this. We are. And if anything, the thing that might be making this proliferate faster are the people out there who are too arrogant, too entitled, who lack empathy, and who think that they might be smarter than the doctors and public health experts. In other words, the narcissists who think they know better than all of us. Don't let them get you down. Learn to do what I call in other videos, learn how to soul distance. It's not just social distancing, it's soul distancing. You can hold yourself back, gray rock them, let them yammer on, and just hold that piece of you back. Create moments for yourself, get enough sleep, try to eat as well as you can. Definitely look at the wide variety of mindfulness and meditative resources out there. They can actually be very useful when you're trying to cope with narcissistic abuse. And above all, as I always tell you, realistic expectations, radical acceptance, don't engage, don't explain, don't defend, and don't personalize. Focus on you, on your health, and on the people who are willing to accept your help in an open-hearted way. Otherwise, it's all hands on deck. Take care of the people who help take care of each other and create community. And for now, continue to sort of gray rock the narcissist in your world and do what feels right for you. I'm sending everyone health, serenity, health to your families, and strength to pull through this. And we will all do this if we draw together and have each other's backs. Thank you again for tuning in. And again, please take care.